Well, good evening, Central Georgia. We just received the 8 o'clock update in terms of both the tropics, in terms of Humberto, which is now a Category 5 hurricane, and Tropical Depression 9. So let's go over the specific details of both storms right now in the Atlantic. Let's take a full screen view at what's going on in terms of the satellite and radar. This is what we call the infrared satellite and radar. You can see the storm on the right. That's Hurricane Humberto, very organized, and that's a Category 5 hurricane, our second Category 5 hurricane so far this season in the Atlantic. And we still have some disorganized showers and storms right now for the Caribbean, so Cuba, Dominican Republic, and the Bahamas. That's the area, and that's the tropical depression, which is Tropical Depression 9. It's expected to become more organized in the next couple of hours, and it should become Tropical Storm Imelda either by late tonight or by early tomorrow morning. So let's take a closer look at Hurricane Humberto. It is still a Category 5 hurricane. It became a Category 5 hurricane at around 5 o'clock. Expected to weaken slightly by tomorrow into a Category 4 storm. Then it will pass the island of Bermuda as a Category 3 storm. Still a major hurricane, but as it gets into cooler water, it will eventually weaken into a Category 2 hurricane and then a post-tropical cyclone by the end of next week. But of course, a storm that everyone is paying attention to is Tropical Depression 9. Hasn't formed into anything yet in terms of a tropical storm. Still has winds of up to 35 miles per hour, moving at a snail's pace towards the northwest at 5 miles per hour. So it should be either a tropical storm by later tonight or by tomorrow early morning. The National Hurricane Center calls us to officially transform into a tropical storm by tomorrow morning at around 2 in the morning with winds of up to 40 miles per hour. By Monday, it should move through the Bahamas and could potentially impact the Floridian coast, providing some tropical storm force winds and potentially some strong rip currents and high swell. By Tuesday, it will finally get closer to the Carolinas and the Georgia coast, and it will transform into a Category 1 hurricane with winds of up to 130 miles per hour. Now, the thing that we've been seeing all throughout today in terms of the National Hurricane Center's track is that it has the storm getting close to the Carolinas, stalling for a bit, and then being steered towards the east away from the eastern seaboard, which is very promising. It is a great scenario to have, especially in the next couple of days. We do not want to have a landfall, and this forecast track says that a landfall is unlikely, which is very good. Looking at the current watches and warnings, we have much of the Bahamas under a tropical storm warning. This means that winds of up to 39 to 74 miles per hour are guaranteed for the next couple of days. And then we also have a tropical storm watch for parts of the Floridian coast, so north of Palm Beach to Volusia County. This just means that it's possible that tropical storm force winds could happen in the next 48 hours. Looking at the spaghetti models, this is the newest run from the GFS spaghetti model, and it shows the majority of the models missing the continental United States in terms of a direct landfall. If this loads right here, you can see most of the models has it going towards east following the track from the National Hurricane Center. You do have a couple of outliers that still has the storm making a landfall for South Carolina, but once again, it's looking like an outlier. The majority of the models has the storm veering off towards the east. Then we have the European model. And the European model is still a little bit stubborn in terms of a potential landfall. Half of the models has this being steered towards the east, but the other half is still sticking to the idea of it moving northward towards the Carolinas and making landfall. But once again, it's just half of the European models. If we combine the overall spaghetti models, the European and the GFS models, we'll just say the majority of those models are hinting towards this storm veering off towards the east and avoiding any landfall towards the Carolina coast or the Georgia coast. Here's a look at the future view. So the storm on the right, that's Hurricane Humberto, very strong, very organized, not going to affect us at all. The storm on the left, closer to the Floridian coast, well, that's Tropical Depression 9, getting close to becoming Tropical Storm Imelda. So by tomorrow, we'll start to get organized, finally seeing a organized eye wall through the Bahamas. See, by Monday early morning, some of the outer bands could provide rain, some gusty winds for the coast for the areas under a tropical storm watch. And you can even see by Tuesday early afternoon, some of the outer bands could reach the Carolinas and the Georgia coast, even though the eye is still within the Bahamas. And then by Tuesday afternoon, finally getting close to the vicinity of Georgia and South Carolina. But you can see the center of the storm starting to veer off towards the east, and it's not as close to the coast as what we originally thought a couple of days ago. Here's a look at the GFS long-range model, and you can see that it has the storm once again stalling and then veering off towards the east, correlating with what the National Hurricane Center has indicated in their forecast track. We have the European model, and it also has generally the same thing. However, it has it stalling, providing rain for South Carolina and North Carolina, and then moving northward during Thursday and Friday. So it'll ride the eastern seaboard, and then eventually it will then go into North Carolina as a very weak storm, not as a hurricane or a tropical storm. So if it does stall, we could potentially have a flooding event for the Carolinas and for the coastal areas. Here's what the Euro is saying. It's saying that the higher rainfall amounts will be farther towards the north and between Charleston and Wilmington. As we can see, 3 to potentially 5 inches of rain. The more south you go, so Savannah, Jacksonville only seeing 1 to 2 inches. And then for places inland, so for central Georgia, we'll only see a trace amount of rain, which would be unfortunate because I know a lot of central Georgians are still really wanting the rain, especially the places in the eastern counties. GFS is showing lower totals, so it's showing around 3 to 4 inches for the Carolinas, but for Savannah and Jacksonville, it's having even lower rainfall totals as it's still holding on to the idea that the center of the storm is going to stay far out of the coast and it will veer out of our neck of the woods towards the Atlantic Ocean. So we'll have the outer bands, but the outer bands will be only reserved for the coast of Georgia, such as Savannah and Jacksonville, and the heavier stuff will be reserved for South Carolina and North Carolina. But for central Georgia, notice 0.1, so trace amounts, barely anything, if that. Looking at the future view wind gusts, we can see that we could potentially receive some breezy conditions over the next couple of days because of what could become Imelda. This is the future view wind gusts showing potentially 15 to 13 mile per hour winds tomorrow. By Monday, much of central Georgia will have 20 mile per hour wind gusts. And then along the coast, we'll have even stronger totals. 23 mile per hour gusts in Savannah, 34 mile per hour gusts in Brunswick. And then once we get into Monday evening, winds will start to die down, but still relatively breezy as compared to normal. So it's looking more and more likely that scenario 2, which means Humberto pulls Imelda away from the United States coast and they can merge together. That's looking more and more likely, and that's correlating with what the National Hurricane Center has said in their forecast tracks. Scenario 1 was looking very strong yesterday. It was looking very likely yesterday that would have a landfall within the Carolinas. We had a lot of models indicating that, and then thankfully the trend is now Imelda missing the coast entirely, which would be fantastic. But we also have scenario 3. This is what I call the chaos scenario, Fujiwara effect, where we have 2 systems, so Imelda and Humberto, getting close enough to each other where they would spin around each other. They'll do a little bit of a tango dance around each other. So let's look at the scenarios played out. Scenario 1 is what looked like was going to happen yesterday. So here we have scenario 1. It has Imelda not being influenced by Humberto, so we'll just go straight north into Carolina. Here's scenario 2. And scenario 2 is what the National Hurricane Center's track is indicating on what's going to happen. So scenario 2 has Imelda being pulled by Humberto and veering towards the east, towards the Atlantic, and eventually merging with Humberto. And then we have scenario 3. Now, scenario 3, the Fujiwara effect, the chaos scenario, that's looking less and less likely. It's looking almost impossible that this will happen, but we still can't rule it out. Where Imelda and Umberto gets close enough to each other, they start to spin around, and it pulls Umberto closer to the coast, and that could be our worst case scenario because Umberto, since it's a strong storm, will have higher impacts for the coast, almost catastrophic. But once again, the chances of this is extremely, extremely low. So looking at the hurricane frequency, so the peak of the season was September 10th, just a couple of weeks ago. We're now on September 27th, getting close to the start of October. However, since we're past the peak of the season, doesn't mean that we're not active in the tropics. Actually, 60% of all tropical systems happen after the peak of the season. And one of the examples of this is actually last year, Helene formed and came through central Georgia around this time. So yeah, around this time, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of Helene. And then we also had Milton form around mid-October. That provided some significant impacts towards Florida. I'd say right around late October. If you have anxiety over the tropics, I'd say late October is when you can put your guard down. And by late October, by early November, that's when the tropics will really start to calm down. So here's the look of the hurricane names, or any tropical names for the future. Imelda is about to be taken off this list since we're about to have Tropical Depression 9 form into Imelda. The next name after Imelda would be Jerry, and then we'll have Karen, which I know a lot of people are joking around that if we have a hurricane named Karen, it'll be the strongest hurricane of all time. Thankfully, there's no science that backs this up, but it is funny to think about. After that will be Lorenzo, Melissa, Nestor, Olga, Paulo, Rebecca, Sebastian, and Tanya. So for central Georgia, here's what you need to know in terms of potential Tropical Cyclone 9, Tropical Depression 9, and what will eventually become Imelda. So we're trending towards no real impacts for central Georgia. Could have some breezy weather, so over the next couple of days we could have gusts of up to 20 miles per hour. That will cause a bad hair day, but it's not going to be anything significant. And we actually could filter in cooler and drier air towards our area, and we could see temperatures finally within the upper 70s. First time we've seen 70s since early August. We'll also have drier air, so nice seasonable conditions overall. So that is the in-depth look on what you need to know in terms of the tropics. Here's the overall summary. I'm going to condense this to around 2 minutes, where I'm going to speak more broadly about what's going on, and I'm going to go a little bit quicker than usual in terms of this summary. I'm going to go over what I talked about just now, but just in a more broader sense. So right now we have 2 tropical systems in the Atlantic Ocean. We have Hurricane Umberto. That is a Category 5 hurricane, the second Category 5 hurricane so far this season for the Atlantic. It has a very organized eye wall moving towards the north. We also have a batch of showers and storms off of the Caribbean near Cuba, Dominican Republic, and the Bahamas. That's Tropical Depression 9, but we are expecting Tropical Depression 9 to be Tropical Storm Imelda by later tonight or by tomorrow early morning. Umberto is going to weaken into a Category 4 tomorrow, then eventually a Category 3 storm around Tuesday as it passes just towards the west of Bermuda. Bermuda could see some impacts like large swells, strong rip currents, potentially some gusty winds. Tropical Depression 9, that's going to be a tropical storm in the next 24 hours, moves slowly through the Bahamas, and it could provide some gusty winds for the Bahamas. Right now they're under a tropical storm warning, and we also have a tropical storm watch for the Floridian coast. By Tuesday, as it gets closer to the Georgia and the Carolina coast, it will be a Category 1 hurricane with winds of up to 130 miles per hour. Thankfully, with the new forecast track, it is now indicating towards the storm stalling for a bit and then veering off towards the east, which would potentially avoid any landfall along the southeastern coast. Here's a look at the current watches and warnings. We have much of the Bahamas under a tropical storm warning, meaning winds of up to 39 to 74 miles per hour are guaranteed. We also have a tropical storm watch for parts of the Floridian coast, so north of Palm Beach all the way to Volusia County. That means tropical storm force winds are possible, but not guaranteed. And if we look at the spaghetti models, the majority of the GFS spaghetti models are following what the National Hurricane Center's track is telling us, in which it's saying that it's going to stall and then veer off towards the east, moving away from us. We do have a couple of models saying that we could see a landfall within the Carolinas, but once again, only a couple models as compared to the majority of the GFS models. Half of the Euro ensemble models are holding on to the idea of a landfall in the Carolinas. But once again, the other half of the Euro models are saying that's going to veer off towards the east, following what the National Hurricane Center is saying and what the GFS is saying as well. So once again, for the Floridian coast, the Georgia coast, and the North Carolina coast, could see some increased rain. We could also see some potentially gusty winds. We could also see rip currents and large swells. For central Georgia, we're trending towards not really any real impacts. Could see some breezy weather for the next couple of days, gusts of up to 20 miles per hour, but nothing very significant. And actually, it could filter in cooler and drier air for next week as well. Now that's your in-depth look at Tropical Depression 9, what eventually become Tropical Storm Imelda and Hurricane Humberto. I'll be back later tonight with a tropical update in case we have Tropical Storm Imelda form. I'm Meteorologist David Guerrero. Have a beautiful night, Central Georgia.